In a quiet riverside village, a kind-hearted girl's life is turned upside down when her father marries a mysterious woman with secrets darker than the forest itself. What happens when love meets witchcraft and a daughter is promised to a serpent spirit?
Long ago, in a village that sat on the banks of a winding river, there lived a widowed fisherman named Koranu. He was known throughout the region for his gentle manner and for the fresh fish he sold at the market every new sunrise. Koranu had a daughter named Nolia, a young woman whose bright spirit seemed to glow from within. Her beauty came not just from her form but from her ever-kind heart. She shared the bounty of fish her father brought home with neighbors and strangers alike, always ensuring that no one went hungry. Many travelers who passed through the village commented on how the aroma of generosity almost hovered around her like a sweet perfume. Alas, as the years went on, Koranu grew lonely. Although father and daughter shared a close bond, Nolia sensed her father's yearning for companionship and a partner to help tend to life's burdens. One day, Koranu returned from a journey to the next village accompanied by a woman whose eyes glittered with sly intelligence. Her name was Zebel. While her appearance was striking, her hair coiled in thick braids studded with cowrie shells, and her complexion as smooth as polished ebony, there was something in her manner that immediately set Nolia's nerves on edge. It was almost as though the shadows of the forest clung to Zebel's movements. Koranu introduced Zebel as his new wife. Soon after, another girl stepped into view, slightly older than Nolia, with features reminiscent of her mother. Her name was Ramula. Where Zebel's gaze could be sharp and calculating, Ramula's was only somewhat softer, but there was a constant tension about her, as though she was accustomed to getting her way. Koranu explained that this was Nolia's new stepsister. Because Nolia loved her father deeply and wished only for his happiness, she smiled and accepted them both into her heart and home. However, she could not shake the uneasy feeling that had lodged deep in her spirit. Some said Zebel was no ordinary woman. Some claimed they had seen her wandering the forest on moonless nights, whispering to shadows. A handful even swore she had once changed shape, turning herself into an owl and gliding among the tree branches. But these stories were dismissed by those who saw Koranu's joy. Love, after all, can silence doubts in even the most perceptive minds. Zebel settled into the fisherman's home as though she had lived there all her life. At first, she was polite to Koranu, and publicly she seemed to treat Nolia fairly well. She insisted on helping with chores and provided a large, ornate trunk filled with clothing, jewelry, and items from distant lands, gifts she showered upon Koranu to win his favor. In all my travels, Zebel claimed, I have never met a man with a kinder heart. I will take care of you and your lovely daughter. She will be like my own child. These words warmed Koranu's heart. But in secret, Zebel's true nature soon revealed itself to Nolia. When Koranu departed at sunrise to fish along the river, Zebel's eyes darkened, and her voice carried an unnatural edge. She demanded the hardest chores from Nolia, assigning her stepdaughter the scrubbing of pots and floor mats until her palms were raw, and commanded her to pound yam flour for hours on end. Meanwhile, Ramula lounged in the shade of a mango tree, painting her nails or braiding her hair, never lifting a finger to help. One fateful day, a wandering elder visited the village. This elder, known as Njamba Kutalo, was rumored to have mysterious powers of sight, able to peer into a person's soul. He was also known to sense when wicked magic was afoot. He came by Koranu's house in search of shade and a cool drink of water. Nolia welcomed him kindly, offering a bowl of fresh coconut milk. He gave her a long, thoughtful look. Child, the spirits smile upon your kindness, he said. Yet I sense a dark presence in this household. Be watchful. Your strength and virtue will be tested. Little did Nolia know how immediate that test would become. For unbeknownst to Koranu and everyone else, Zebel was not just a cunning woman, she was indeed a witch who sought power and wealth above all else. Zebel's reasons for marrying Koranu were not rooted in love. The fisherman's property was large, and the land was fertile. Equally important, the vantage point near the river gave her easy access to hidden places where she could slip into the forest for her nocturnal rituals. This region of the continent had a legend that occasionally, if one was unscrupulous enough, one could summon a powerful snake spirit who dwelled in a hidden cavern deep in the forests. Some said that this snake spirit took the form of a handsome young man at will, a shapeshifter who could shower those who pleased him with unimaginable riches. However, the ritual required a living bride to be offered in marriage to the snake. By binding oneself to the serpent, either personally or through a close family member, one gained blessings and power beyond measure. Zebel had set her mind on forging this forbidden alliance. She planned for her own daughter, Ramula, to be that bride. For many nights, Zebel crept out of the hut, slipping silently through the tall grass toward the forest. She carried bowls of blackened herbs and whispered incantations to the spirits in the wind. She pleaded with the snake spirit for an audience, for a sign, for a promise of riches. And indeed, on one eerie night when the moon was absent from the sky, her dark prayers were answered. Her footprints in the damp earth led to a clearing where an ancient baobab tree stretched its crooked branches toward the heavens like pleading fingers. There, she felt a chill wind swirl about her ankles. She saw a single serpent slither out from the shadows. Its scales shimmered with an unearthly sheen, and its eyes glowed gold in the moonless night. Zebel knelt in the clearing. An otherworldly voice rasped through the gloom. "What do you seek, mortal?" "I seek great power," Zebel whispered. "The kind of power that will allow me and my offspring to live like kings. Wealth to satisfy every desire. The submission of those who doubt me. The adoration of those who fear me. In exchange," the voice hissed, "you must provide me a bride. One with a mortal form that is pleasing and strong, that I might take what I will. If you can ensure my satisfaction, your reward will be more than you can imagine. If you fail, you will forfeit everything." Zebel, trembling in both fear and excitement, lowered her head to the ground. "I have a daughter. She is beautiful and young. She will be yours to wed. Only grant us your protection and shower upon us your bounty." Thus, a wicked pact was formed. The serpent vanished back into the undergrowth, leaving behind only a broken feather from some unknown bird, a chilling omen of the twisted union to come. As the days turned into weeks, Zebel's eyes glinted with anticipation. She began to adorn Ramula in luxurious clothing, some of which she fashioned herself by weaving gold threads into bright, vibrant cloth. She placed beaded necklaces and bracelets upon Ramula's arms and neck. The daughter enjoyed her mother's sudden, extravagant attention, although she sometimes questioned why it was all happening so fast. Ramula had always dreamed of marrying someone wealthy, but she found it peculiar that her mother kept speaking about an important suitor whom she was not allowed to meet until the right time. "Patience," Zebel whispered. "You will be married soon enough, and then you shall have all you desire." Meanwhile, Nolia found her chores multiplied, and her father was often absent, traveling farther and farther to fish markets in neighboring villages. In quiet moments, Nolia confided in her closest friend, a neighboring girl named Tump. Tump, who had an intuitive sense for trouble, frowned with concern. "Your stepmother's aura darkens every day. You must stay vigilant." One night, Corona was away in a distant market, and Nolia was left to prepare supper with only the dim glow of a small lantern. The wind howled outside, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Zebel approached her stepdaughter. "Nolia," she said in a soft, almost seductive tone, "there is a special fruit that grows in a grove deep in the forest. It is said that if one offers that fruit to the ancestors, it brings blessings to the home. I want you to go fetch it." Nolia looked toward the window, through which lightning occasionally flashed. "Stepmother, it is very late, and the storm is coming. Are you sure it cannot wait until morning?" Zebel smiled, revealing her sharp teeth in the flickering lantern light. "I must have it tonight," she declared. Now go, and do not return without it." Reluctantly, Nolia draped a cloak over her shoulders and took a small handheld lantern to guide her way. She stepped into the pounding rain, the wind snatching at her clothes, as she headed toward the forest. She had no choice but to obey. Unbeknownst to Nolia, her departure was precisely what Zebel wanted. Soon after, Zebel dressed Ramula in splendid attire, a deep red wrap around her body, golden jewelry, and a veil that sparkled with tiny crystals. Under the roaring storm, Zebel led her daughter by the hand through the muddy paths toward that same clearing where she had once encountered the serpent. The ceremony was to take place this very night, when the storm's fury was believed to open a doorway between worlds. Yet fate, and perhaps the spirits of good, intervened. Nolia, who struggled with each step to push through the forest, realized that the fruit Zebel had requested could not be found anywhere within easy reach. She wandered deeper and deeper, eventually stumbling upon a faint glow between the trees, torchlight, perhaps. Intrigued and worried, she followed the light until she arrived at the clearing by the baobab tree. There, partially sheltered from the rain by the massive branches, Zebel was performing a sinister ritual. The mother chanted incomprehensible words, her eyes rolled back in her head. Ramula stood, trembling, uncertain and fearful, though she tried to maintain a facade of excitement for the marriage that she believed would bring her riches. A swirl of mist gathered, taking shape at the center of the clearing. The swirling fog parted, revealing a tall figure with skin the color of burnished bronze. He wore elaborate garments made of shimmering scales, and his eyes glowed inhumanly. Around his neck coiled a living serpent whose tongue flicked in and out, tasting the air. This was the snake spirit, an ancient being of powerful magic. His voice slid through the clearing like a hiss, "Is she to be my bride?" "Yes," Zebel proclaimed, her tone euphoric and trembling. "This is my daughter, Ramula. She is ready." Though Ramula had braced for the possibility that her future husband might be unusual, she could not contain a cry of terror at the sight of the serpent coiled around the figure's neck. The creature's intense eyes bored into her. Nonetheless, intoxicated by the visions her mother had painted, visions of wealth, authority, a life in palaces, she stood there, struggling against the primal fear that welled in her gut. Zebel's words echoed in her mind, "This is your chance to become royalty." Unnoticed by them, Nolia crouched behind the wide trunk of the baobab tree, her eyes wide with shock. She watched as the snake spirit stepped closer to Ramula and whispered, "Accept my ring, and we are bound." He held out a ring forged from a coiled scale, glistening even in the dim light. Trembling, Ramula extended her hand, allowing him to slip the ring onto her finger. Immediately, thunder boomed overhead, and lightning illuminated the clearing in a cascade of white. It was as if the heavens themselves were warning them of dire consequences. Zebel laughed, exultation clear in her voice. "Now, you must bestow upon us your gifts," she demanded of the snake spirit. But the snake spirit's mouth curved into a chilling smirk. He lifted a finger and traced it across Ramula's cheek, where a faint gold shimmer remained. Then he faced Zebel. "Foolish mortal," he rasped. "Did you think to command me? Our pact was that I marry your daughter. But the blessings I grant come in ways that will serve my aims, not yours." Zebel felt a tremor of dread. "But you promised me wealth." "Promised? I only said you would gain more than you can imagine if you pleased me," he replied. "But do not fret. You shall reap rewards, in the manner I choose." Abruptly, a swirl of serpent illusions surrounded Ramula. She cried out, disoriented, as the glowing eyes of the spirit drew her in. The ring on her finger glowed hot, and the serpent around his neck uncoiled, slithering to the ground and growing in size until it towered above the cowering girl. Nolia felt her heart thunder in her chest. She realized that if she did nothing, Ramula might be lost forever. Despite her stepsister's cruelty and laziness, Nolia could not abandon her to such a horrifying fate. Summoning her courage, Nolia dashed into the clearing. "Stop!" she cried, surprising both Zebel and Ramula. The snake spirit spun around, eyes narrowing at this intrusion. Zebel's face twisted with rage. "How dare you meddle? This is not your affair." But in a loud voice that resonated with unexpected power, Nolia declared, "I will not allow you to harm Ramula or enslave her to your darkness. I do not care what your pact is, I refuse to stand aside." The snake spirit let out a hiss laugh. "Such boldness," he said. "You think you can save her? A mortal girl with no knowledge of magic?" Zebel sneered. "You wretched child, you have ruined everything. I should have sent you away far earlier. Now the serpent will punish us all." Zebel lunged toward Nolia, ready to grab her and offer her to the serpent as a diversion. But before she could lay a hand on her stepdaughter, a rolling thunderclap struck so close that the baobab tree itself shuddered. A new presence stepped into the clearing, Jumbakutalo, the traveling elder with the gift of spiritual sight. "I felt this wickedness stirring from afar," Jumbakutalo said, brandishing a staff carved with ancient symbols. "Zebel, your greed has corrupted your soul. You have made a pact that endangers our entire village. That cannot stand." The snake spirit flicked his tongue, eyes riveted on the elder. "Another meddler. You cannot stop me from claiming what is rightfully mine." Without further warning, the serpent shapeshifter lunged. Ramula shrieked, stumbling backward. Yet Jumbakutalo raised his staff, and a swirling light enveloped the clearing. Nalia shielded her eyes against the glare. She heard hissing, chanting, the drumming of wind and rain. When she could see again, she found that the serpent's form had been repelled, forced back several paces. Storm clouds overhead seemed to swirl in a vortex, as though the sky itself was taking part in the battle. Enraged, Zebel clawed at the air, shrieking curses at both Nolia and the elder. However, Jumbakutalo's staff crackled with energy. "Evil witch," he intoned, "you have broken the laws of our ancestors. You have invoked a spirit that brings harm to the innocent. The guardians do not look kindly on such acts." Now, a terrifying possibility flickered in the snake spirit's eyes. If the guardians of the land had truly stepped in, even he might find himself in jeopardy. Resolving to fight, he bared fangs that had emerged from his mouth, and thick snakes began slithering across the ground as though conjured from the shadows. The clearing churned with a horrifying dance of serpents. Nolia and Ramula clung to each other in terror. Zebel tried to cast more spells, but the brilliance emanating from Jumbakutalo's staff seemed to disperse her dark incantations. Lightning struck a tree at the edge of the clearing, and flaming branches fell to the ground. The smell of burning wood flooded the air. Nolia trembled, uncertain how she could help. All she had was her courage and her will to protect Ramula. The snake spirit fought back with monstrous force, but the elder's spiritual strength was formidable. "I will not be banished so easily," roared the spirit, and he turned his feral gaze toward Nolia. In the blink of an eye, the serpent shot forward, aiming to ensnare her in his coils. Perhaps the spirit sensed that her heart was the strongest among them. With a strangled cry, Nolia realized she was cornered. Ramula, in her panic, had stumbled away, leaving Nolia exposed. Zebel was too consumed by her own terror to do anything more than gape. But at that moment, Jumbakutalo shouted a phrase in an ancient language, and the circle of light surrounded Nolia, deflecting the serpent's lethal strike. Thwarted again, the creature bellowed in frustration, its form flickering between a tall man and a gigantic snake. Summoning one last surge of power, Jumbakutalo raised his staff, and an eruption of spiritual energy lit the clearing as bright as day. Nolia fell to the wet ground, dazed, while Zebel and Ramula cried out. The snake spirit let out a tortured hiss that rose into a dreadful shriek. Then, as though ripped apart by invisible hands, the spirit's shape dissipated into the storm. For a moment, all that could be heard was the pounding of the rain. Nolia slowly pushed herself up, her heart hammering like a frantic drum. Njambakutalo's shoulders sagged with exhaustion, and he clutched his staff for support. The serpent was gone, banished. In the clearing center lay the coil-like ring that had been placed on Ramula's finger. It was blackened, cracked, and hissed as though the metal itself had been scorched. Ramula stared at it, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks, shock and relief contorting her features. In the hush that followed, Zebel at last regained her voice. She rushed to the ring, snatching it up in a desperate attempt to salvage the pact. No. This cannot be over. We were promised everything. But the ring crumbled to dust in her hands. Njambakutalo shook his head. Your greed nearly destroyed you and your daughter. Now, Zebel, you must face the consequences of your dark deeds. You have endangered the spirits of this land and threatened the peace of the village. You tried to sacrifice your own child for personal gain. The guardians will show no mercy. Nolia, still trembling, looked at Ramula's tear-streaked face. She realized that, for all of Ramula's spoiled manners, she was but a pawn in her mother's wicked scheme. Compassion overcame resentment. Ramula, she said gently, are you hurt? Ramula could only shake her head wordlessly, terror still gripping her heart. She clung to Nolia, her eyes wide in a silent plea for comfort. Zebel rose to her feet, her pride still fueling her anger. You cannot judge me, she spat at the elder. I answered to powers greater than you. I wanted only prosperity for my family. Njambakutalo gave Zebel a sad, piercing look. Sometimes people forget that not all power is good, and not all wealth is worth having. You knew exactly what you were bargaining with. Now face your punishment. With that, the elder whispered a potent incantation. The air around Zebel glowed with an eerie luminescence. She tried to speak, to lunge forward, but her limbs stiffened. Her cries turned into hisses as, in a horrifying transformation, Zebel's body began to twist. Her arms merged with her sides, her legs fused, and scales rippled across her skin. In moments, she had become a large, dark snake, thrashing wildly on the sodden ground. Her eyes still held something of her human consciousness, wide with shock and fury. Ramula screamed at the sight of her mother's transformation, stepping backward with trembling legs. Nolia felt her stomach lurch, but she turned to Njambakutalo. Is there no other way? She asked softly. Her fate is sealed by her own evil. The guardians have taken judgment, Njambakutalo replied. Her misdeeds have cast her into this cursed form. Yet this was not the end. The newly turned snake, once Zebel, continued to thrash and slide across the wet ground, until with a mighty recoil, it vanished into the darkness of the forest. The others watched, stunned, uncertain whether to be grateful or even more afraid. Njambakutalo sighed heavily. It may be that the forest spirits will keep her contained, or she will roam as a bitter serpent until the last of her days, carrying the weight of her sin. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the clearing for a final moment. Then the storm began to abate, as if the cosmic battle had ended, and the forces of good and ill were retiring from the field. Over the following days, word spread through the village about that dreadful stormy night. Koranu, returning from his trip, was horrified and heartbroken to learn what had nearly befallen his daughter, Nolia, and stepdaughter, Ramula. When Njambakutalo shared the truth of Zebel's betrayal, that she had planned to wed Ramula to the snake spirit for wealth and power, the kindly fisherman could only stare, tears in his eyes, at how blind he had been to Zebel's true nature. He embraced his daughter, thanking the ancestors that she had survived. As for Ramula, the ordeal changed her. Shaken to her core by her mother's monstrous pact and her own near consummation of that forced marriage, she found herself weeping in Nolia's arms. Forgive me, she sobbed. I mocked you, I let you do all the chores, I relished in mother's cruelty toward you. But you still stood up for me. You saved me from that snake spirit. Why? Nolia's eyes filled with tears of compassion. Because, Ramula, you are my sister now, and no matter how you have acted, I couldn't stand by and watch you suffer a fate worse than death. Humbled, Ramula promised she would change her ways, though she struggled with the guilt that threatened to consume her. Over time, she found that she had to learn to work alongside Nolia, dividing chores equally, seeking to atone for all her past selfishness. Whenever she felt bitterness rising, she remembered that terrifying night, the cold hiss of the serpent's voice, and forced herself to recall Nolia's courage and generosity. Though the two sisters would never forget the horrors they had experienced, that memory became a bond through which they grew genuinely close. Yet, there was still the mystery of Zebel. Days turned into weeks, and some villagers claimed to have seen a large serpent slithering near the river or at the edge of the forest, its eyes glowing with an unnatural intelligence. Some said the snake watched the fisherman's hut from afar, a silent sentinel of regret and anger. Others doubted this was truly Zebel, thinking it must be rumor. One late afternoon, Nolia was washing clothes at the riverbank when she felt an odd prickle on the back of her neck, as though she was being watched. Glancing up, she thought she saw a dark-scaled snake slip beneath the water's surface. A shiver ran through her, but the creature never approached. In time, Koranu and his daughters decided to move to a different plot of land, not far from the original hut but closer to the rest of the village, so they would be surrounded by the warmth of neighbors and community. Koranu could still fish, and Nolia's dear friend Tump helped them settle in. Life began anew. Njamba Kutilo periodically stopped by, offering prayers and blessings. He never spoke of reversing the curse on Zebel, nor did he show pity for her transformation. He had recognized how her darkness had come from within her own heart, how she had sought to barter away her daughter's life. Nonetheless, Nolia sometimes spent time alone, sitting by the river, letting her thoughts wander to that night. She wondered whether Zebel, now a serpent, had any remorse. She wondered if redemption was possible for one who had committed such betrayal. Perhaps the guardians alone could answer that question. As the seasons shifted and harvest time arrived, the family's fortunes improved. Ramula truly worked hard, side by side with Nolia, gleaning millet in the fields and washing clothes at the river. She learned to fry fish and cook cassava. Freed from the twisted influence of her mother, Ramula discovered a simpler, more genuine happiness in daily life. The villagers, too, were astonished at the transformation of Koranu's elder daughter, many praising Nolia for showing how kindness could inspire change. The father, for his part, was simply relieved to have both daughters safe and his household free of dark magic. One late afternoon, a traveling merchant named Jumi arrived in the village. He came with a caravan of goods, spices, woven mats, carved figurines, and even rare seeds from distant lands. He was a tall man, with a refined air, but a gentle smile. During his stay, Jumi soon noticed the radiant warmth in Nolia's demeanor. Intrigued, he began to chat with her while she shopped for fresh spices. Before long, they found themselves talking about more than goods and currency. Nolia was drawn to Jumi's stories of his travels, fascinated by the glimpses he offered of places she had never seen. He, in turn, admired her compassion and willingness to help others. Soon enough, a quiet courtship blossomed. Jumi extended his stay, helping Koranu repair fishing nets and teaching Nolia and Ramula new ways of cooking the spices he carried. In quiet moments, he and Nolia strolled along the river's edge, speaking about dreams of the future. Neither sister paid much attention to illusions of grand wealth or illusions of royal courts anymore. Their near brush with sinister power had taught them that humility and sincerity were blessings in themselves. Within a matter of months, Jumi sought Koranu's permission to marry Nolia. The fisherman, overjoyed by Jumi's character, agreed wholeheartedly. The wedding was to be a small, heartfelt celebration by the river, with neighbors and friends. The entire village came out to see it. Ramula stood by Nolia's side, tears of happiness on her cheeks, though tinged with a complicated sorrow. She confessed to Nolia in a quiet moment, "I am so glad to see you happy, sister. You deserve it after everything that happened. Yet I cannot help but wish Mother was here to see how things turned out, without the darkness that consumed her. She might have been proud in her own way, if she were ever truly capable of love." Nolia clasped Ramula's hand. "I believe she lost sight of what was truly important, but I do not hold it against you. You have changed, Ramula. Your heart has grown. Let that be your comfort." The wedding day dawned bright. A gentle wind flowed over the river, carrying the scent of wildflowers in bloom. Dumi wore a richly embroidered sash across his shoulder, while Nolia wore a delicate beaded headpiece that Tamp had gifted her. Njamba Kutilo was there, blessing the union with chants and prayers to the ancestors. Children danced, beating drums that echoed with joy rather than fear. Yet amid the laughter and the feasting, Nolia felt a subtle prickle at the nape of her neck, reminiscent of the day by the river. She set down her cup of sweet millet drink, stepping away from the festivities for a moment. Following that strange intuition, she moved beyond the crowd to the water's edge. Sunlight glinted off the gentle ripples. Standing upon a low rock, Nolia peered out. There, partially concealed by reeds, she saw it, a dark-scaled snake with watchful, unnaturally bright eyes. For a few heartbeats, Nolia stared at the serpent, and it stared back. A swirl of conflicting emotions rose in her chest. It was likely Zebel, her stepmother, cursed to roam in this inhuman form. Nolia felt an urge to speak, but words failed her. The snake blinked slowly, flicking its tongue. Did it feel hatred? Longing? Regret? Nolia could not be sure, but she held the creature's gaze as gently as she could, hoping on some level that Zebel understood she had found peace and forgiven all that had happened. In a fluid motion, the snake sank beneath the water surface and was gone, leaving only a ripple. Nolia inhaled, realizing her hands were shaking. She pressed a palm to her chest, steadying herself. The weight of that silent exchange lingered as she returned to the wedding, where Dumi was searching for her. The ceremony concluded in triumph, laughter ringing out. Dumi and Nolia soon departed to build a life in a small cottage, located a short walk upstream from Corona's home. They visited regularly, bringing fish, bread, and news of passing travelers. Ramula remained with Corona, continuing to find her place in the village. More than one young man began to admire her changed attitude. Eventually, she began to reciprocate. Her experiences had tempered her vanity and made her wise to the pitfalls of greed. Still, the memory of Zebel's transformation never faded from the sisters' minds, nor from Corona's. People whispered that sometimes at dusk, a haunting serpent cry echoed from the shadows. Njamba Kutilo explained to Nolia once, in private, that as long as Zebel harbored bitterness or refused to seek true atonement, she would remain bound in serpentine form. Some souls break themselves upon the rocks of their own pride, he said gently. Your compassion is admirable, but we cannot save those who do not wish to be saved. The best we can do is live rightly. So life in the village went on, marked by little joys and occasional sorrows. The story of the woman who tried to marry her daughter to a snake was told and retold around firesides, the details sometimes exaggerated, the moral always shining clear. Do not let greed and power overshadow the precious bonds of family and the sanctity of life. Elders reminded the young ones that even the greatest wealth means nothing if one loses one's soul to darkness. As for Nolia, she lived contentedly with Dumi, soon welcoming a small child whose laughter filled their home. Ramula, having worked to mend her ways, grew into a respected figure in the village. She helped neighbors with their harvest and taught children how to weave baskets. Many who had once dismissed her as spoiled came to admire her resilience and transformation. One day, she too found love, a quiet hunter who appreciated her tenderness and the regret that shaped her humility. They married and built a modest home near Coronu's dwelling. Years later, Njomba Kutalo, grown ancient, prepared to depart the region. Before he left, he visited Coronu's family for one final meal. Sitting around a warm fire, sharing a stew of fish, yams, and spices, they reminisced about the battles fought and blessings shared. Njomba Kutalo turns to Nolia. "Child, you have proven that love and kindness can stand firm against the strongest dark magic. Remember that truth and teach it to your children, and your children's children." Nolia nodded with a smile. "I will, elder. We will not forget." In the quiet that followed, she thought once more of Zebel. Perhaps out in the swampy edges of the forest, beneath twisted roots or among damp stones, a great snake still roamed, possessed of a human memory, yearning for a redemption she could not bring herself to seek. The weight of that tragedy would never fully lift, but in the new life that had arisen from the ashes of that horror, Nolia found solace. The family that remained, Coronu, Ramula, Jumi, and the children, had discovered how to hold on to hope, harmony, and a renewed sense of devotion to the ancestors and the land. Thus ends the tale of the witch stepmother who tried to wed her daughter to a serpent in order to claim wealth and power. The darkness of her ambition nearly destroyed those she loved, but the courage of a kind-hearted girl and the intervention of a wise elder turned the tide. Even though Zebel now wanders the land in the form of a serpent, cursed by her own doing, her daughter Ramula and stepdaughter Nolia chose a different path, a path lit by compassion, redemption, and gratitude for life's genuine blessings. May we remember this story and hold its lesson close: what is gained through evil is fleeting, and the price is always too high. True wealth lies in love, empathy, community, and respect for the sacredness of life. And no matter how hopeless the darkness may seem, a single spark of bravery can banish an entire storm. Moral lesson: when greed overshadows love and family, disaster follows. True wealth lies in compassion, unity, and respect for one another. Enjoyed the story? Like, share, and subscribe for more folktales and life lessons. And don't forget to let me know your favorite part in the comments below.